Religion is a business. However, it's the only business where you can fail miserably and not keep any promises for thousands of years and still end up with millions of buyers, tax exempt status, and a cabinet position in the White House. And what do the buyers receive in return? They receive holy wars, heretic burnings, divided families, shame culture, pedophiles, predators, and endless excuses. Yet, when us non-believers speak up and suggest, hey, maybe we stop buying this poison, we get accused of being evil. Well, if being a good guy means I have to accept deities that command genocide, treat women like property, drown babies, execute apostates, and need their egos stroked every second of the day, then I don't want to be one of those good guys. We're tired of being polite, and we're here to inform you that the Emperor of Heaven has no clothes. But hey, if you disagree, feel free to call in and prove us wrong. The lines are open, and the show starts now. Welcome in, everybody. Today is July 27th, 2025. I'm your host, Justin. You might know me elsewhere as Deconstruction Zone or DZ. Joining me today is a great friend of mine. He is the scion of science, the mitochondria messiah, a periodic table patriot, a master of molecules, a cerebral sensei, and the guy that Captain Planet goes to for advice. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Planet Peterson, to the show.
That was great, man. You blindsided me with that. That was fantastic alliteration.
Eric, it's great to have you on the show today. For those who are new to the internet, Planet Peterson is on YouTube and TikTok and everywhere else. If you like what you see today, you can find more of him already out there. And I've already vetted him. He's a great friend of mine. We've done lots of shows together elsewhere. So I know you're going to love him. You're going to enjoy his content. I hope you enjoy the show today. And before we get started, I have to say that the Atheist Experience is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Now, we do have some callers already on the line. So with that, let's just jump right into the calls. First up, we've got a theist named Melon, all the way from Germany, that says, why is death a bad thing in a world without God? I'll be curious to know some thoughts on this. Can you hear me, Melon? Melon? Hello? Is Melon not with us? Uh-oh. Well, Eric, you can't hear anything. I can't hear anything, right?
No, I don't hear anything.
Uh-oh. Maybe Melon's not with us. We can drop him and move on to the next one. Maybe it's an issue on Melon's end, and if not, we'll find out shortly. Let me see if I can return Melon to the queue. I won't drop him. I'll just put him back in the queue for now. And we're going to bring up the next theist from Tennessee and see if this works. If not, then we'll have to look somewhere else. All right, we've got with us HC from Tennessee that says the Bible is a moral guide. Can you hear me, HC? Oh. I think we might have an audio conundrum. Let me check with our friends here. Usually when there's like a technical glitch, they'll just announce it. So you know,
yeah,
let you know they're working on it. I think we got a straight disconnect.
Yeah, don't ask me. That's all I know.
We'll give them a second and see if we can work it out. Yeah, paging Vern. Uh-oh. Well, I hope their computer didn't crash back at the home office. Well, while we're at it, let's do this. We've got a couple things in the announcements that we can go over. I assume the audience can hear us. even though we can't hear the guests. So we'll go through some announcements, right? We've got the Bat Cruise coming up, friends. Bat Cruise 2025. It's going to be August 16th at 7 p.m. Tickets are selling quickly, so get yours today and join people like Tim B, April W, Gabriel, and others who already have their tickets. Also, not available to attend, it's okay. We got you covered. You can still help out by donating underneath the live chat to purchase a ticket for one of our hosts or crew. So you can visit that link. There's going to be a link in the description for tiny.cc/Bat Cruise to get your tickets. And we hope to see you on the boat. There should be some creators from AXP that will be able to join you at the Bat Cruise. And so it should be a lot of fun. And also, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share out the videos and the channel. Make sure you enable your notifications. And then comment below on your favorite caller. We'd love to hear your feedback. I don't know about anyone else, but I typically read through the comments on a lot of the videos because I love to see the interactions with the viewers. You can also join weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen, the Atheist Experience. The doors open at noon. It's a great place for building community, and you can just come and hang out with your friends and watch the barbecues. We want to also, well, the crew's busy. We'll save that for later. We'll thank the crew later. We are getting calls populating the call queue, so now we just need, we need hopefully working technology. Is anyone on the other end can confirm if we can bring in another guest? I hear somebody. Okay, I got some messages too. Okay, try a caller. Yep, want me to pull a caller up?
Yep, I think you can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's grab HC again from the QHC from Tennessee. Says the Bible is a moral guide, and we do have confirmation that the audio is working this time, at least on one end. So let's give it a shot. HC, can you hear us? If
Yes,
HC can hear us, we can. Oh, there we go. We got him. HC? Hello?
Yes.
Gotcha. All right, HC, welcome in. You're talking to Justin and Planet Peterson. There might be a slight delay, so bear with us. We'll try not to talk over each other. The claim on entry is that the Bible is a moral guide. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's a way that you can kind of it helps you with your life. Like, let's say your situation in the Bible, it's an answer to everything in the Bible.
Okay, so you think the Bible is like, so if I open the Bible and say, listen, I've got questions about like what to do. I don't know, say for example, if my children act up, you think the Bible would be the guide for letting you know what to do?
Yes, because the Bible talks about how to, like, to discipline your kids like lovingly, and like show them like this instruction of the Lord, like to tell your parents not to provoke their children.
Right. Okay. So I'm pretty familiar with some of the biblical laws. Let me know if you think these should be applicable. So like we can go to Deuteronomy 21. It says, if someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father and mother, who does not heed them when they discipline him, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town. And at the gate of that place, I shall say to the elders of the town, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the town shall stone him to death. You shall purge the evil from your midst. You think that's like good behavior to enact with our families?
This is like a different kind of society than the one we live in today. This is a barbaric society, one that was rough around the edges. It didn't have like a lot of.
Sure was. Yeah.
With respect specifically to children, Proverbs has some real doozies. Proverbs 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it away. Proverbs 23:13 and 14, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. And Proverbs 29:15, The rod of correction imparts wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. So the Bible's pretty keen on beating some sense or behavior into your children. But like today, we know that this is absolutely a horrendous thing to do. It's not effective, apart from just being grossly offensive and causing harm. It's just not effective. I mean, they've removed corporal punishment even from juvenile detention centers pretty much across the entire nation. Oddly, you can still do it in public schools in a huge number of states, but not juvenile detention centers, which is pretty strange. But so if we acted biblically, this just would not, first of all, modern people, I don't think, would call this very moral, but it's also just stupid, terrible advice that we know for a fact doesn't work.
Well, for back then, these laws were given by God for a certain context before forgiveness of sins could be achieved.
But you are telling us that the Bible can be used as a moral guide, except apparently it can't. Like, what's the use of saying, oh, back then well, okay, there's so many things going on here. Do you think that somehow children in the past were different than children of today, and that you could beat good behavior into children in the past? Because I don't think that was ever the case. I think Proverbs was wrong back then too.
Well, I mean, is there like any proof that it's not just metaphorical in the way it's speaking?
But they're laws. In fact, in Deuteronomy 28, God gives you all kinds of punishments if you break the laws. He does the same thing in Leviticus 26. He even goes on to say, like if you break these laws, if you disobey me, this is what's going to happen. Says, if you disobey me and continue hostile to me, I will continue hostile to you in fury, and in turn I will punish you myself sevenfold for your sins. And he says, you will eat the flesh of your sons and you will eat the flesh of your daughters. Like, do you think that that's a necessary thing, to punish people with eating the flesh of their children?
No, not really. But did that ever come true? Was God just making a threat, saying this is what would happen if you choose to disobey me?
It did come true, yeah. If you read Jeremiah 19:9 and Lamentations, during the siege in Jerusalem, God sends an army, and the battle is so intense that they get holed up inside of the city walls, and they end up having to consume their own children to survive. And God says he's the one that causes that.
Jesus in the New Testament says that you should not harm children. He says it himself, like in the New Testament.
Actually, he says that kind of. He contradicts himself in Matthew chapter 7 when he chastises the Pharisees for not executing the rebellious son, or the son that curses mother and father. So he wants you to behave a particular way, but he also wants you to follow the law. In Mark 7.
Is that?
Yeah, Mark 7. He's chastising them for following Talmudic hand-washing laws. And he says, you abandon the commandments of God and hold to human tradition. Then he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and whoever speaks evil of the father must surely die. But you say that if anyone tells father or mother, whatever support you might have had from me as korban, that is an offering to God, then you no longer permit them to do anything for the father or the mother. So what he's saying here is, like, this law of Moses that allows you to execute children that curse their parents, you're not doing it. You're supposed to be doing this. You guys are hypocrites.
Yes, but he never really, like, there's a story where Jesus says not to throw the stone on the woman. Why would Jesus be advocating for stoning children?
John chapter 8, yeah. So in John, first of all, I think there's two things with John chapter 8. I don't think Jesus actually said anything in that particular episode with the adulterous woman. That was something that doesn't show up until the 5th century in the manuscript evidence, and it first appears as a marginal note. It appears that it was a popular story that made its way into the Bible. Second of all, I don't think he was advocating for abrogating the law of Moses in the way that you think. Not that he doesn't do it elsewhere, but what he was doing in that passage is actually kind of smart, because he's saying, listen, the law says we got to stone this woman, right? Now, what he doesn't want to do is say, don't do it, because he knows he's stuck. He's got to advocate for the law of Moses, because he does everywhere else. So what he does, he says, listen, if you do what the law tells you to do by stoning this woman, you're next. You without the first, ye who doesn't have any sin cast the first stone, meaning, listen, if you stone her, you can do it. You're more than welcome to do it. But if we're going to be carrying out this law effectively, you guys are next. So think carefully about whether or not you want this to actually happen. That being said, I don't think that story is even original to the gospel.
An important note there is that Jesus is hardly calling for abolition of this cruel and unusual punishment. Right. He's just calling other people hypocrites. I want to try to focus back to your original point, though. What Justin brings up with the killing unruly children. Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, they all say to do that. Now, your claim is we can find morality in the Bible. So if a parent opens up the Bible, and yes, it's Old Testament, but they'll read this and says, well, if my child is unruly, I can have him executed. Now, do you think that's a good idea? And if you don't think it's a good idea, do you think it was a good idea back then? And then what would be the reasons?
Well, no, I don't think it's a good idea. I think that kids should never be harmed in any way, shape, or form. That's just egregious to me.
But why does God think that they should then?
Well, Paul, that's why God made these laws, is because Paul talks about it being like a mirror to how broken we are. So the laws are never really meant to be like these authoritative things. It's to show how broken we are and how we need to stay like Jesus.
Is God indifferent to whether or not people lie under oath, worship other gods, covet things, etc., murder, steal? Is God indifferent to those things?
No.
Sorry?
No.
Then why would God be indifferent to his other laws that he gives people?
Well, couldn't he be saying this is what should happen? It's not really what would really happen.
I don't really understand. So the consequences are what God doesn't care about? Or the law is what God doesn't care? Because if you're going to say God doesn't want you to stone your children to death for unruly, it's just to show you how broken you are. Okay, well then God doesn't care if I covet my neighbor's wife and if I have affairs and if I lie under, I'm like trying to point to the 10 commandments, right? God doesn't care if I break the 10 commandments then. Because it's just to show how wicked we are, right? So why should we follow any moral advice that we find in the Bible then?
Because the New Testament recontextualizes this into what it really should be, which is love, grace, and forgiveness. Even in the Old Testament, God shows mercy to people.
But HC, I want you to just for a second to kind of process what Peterson was saying, right? Which is, if God gave these commands, like you're suggesting God gave these commands to do like horrible things to your children, but he didn't actually want you to do it, right? Well, if that's the case, then why wouldn't we just extrapolate this to all the other commands? God didn't want us to be faithful to our spouses. God didn't want us to worship him alone. Like, why are you picking this one command and saying, well, that's not really what God wanted?
Because God has a purpose behind everything he does.
Right, but what measuring stick, what tool are you using to determine that when God gave this command, he didn't want you to follow it, but when he gave the other commands, he did want you to follow it? How do you make that determination?
Well, we have the entirety of Scripture now. And so we can see what exactly God's evolution, his plan truly was. And God's plan was to institute forgiveness and love.
HC. Okay. Let's say that it's 2022 years ago. So Jesus hasn't been born yet. Okay. What should people do with the laws and prescriptions that are ordained by God in at that point, all we have is the Hebrew Bible. What should people have done in the past? Their kids are being unruly. Jesus hasn't been born yet. He hasn't preached anything. Paul hasn't written any letters yet. But morality comes from this supposedly inspired text, and God's morality is supposed to be the correct morality or whatever. So it's 2022, 3, whatever years ago. A child is being unruly. What should a parent do?
Well, they should talk to their kids, and they should try to talk things out. Because even in the Old Testament, God showed forgiveness to David whenever he commits the egregious sin of murder and adultery.
Well, the kid won't listen. Deuteronomy says drag them in front of the town elders and say, this kid won't listen, and then they get stoned to death. So would there be anything wrong if they did that? Because you're presupposing and you're preaching univocality. And if that's the case, then somehow Jewish people before Jesus were born were as if they were going around being like, yeah, we're not supposed to actually follow any of these rules or anything like that. So I'm just curious, what would be, and we'll just go back to my original example. What should they do? The kid won't listen. Are they permitted to drag them in front of the town elders, declare that the child is completely unruly, and stone them to death as prescribed by the Bible?
Yes, they should go see the town elders. Then it should be up to the elders to decide what would need to be done.
Okay, so why is killing children who won't listen, why was that a good thing to do in the past?
But it wasn't a good thing to do ever.
You just said that they should do it.
So God told them to do something that wasn't good?
The elders say to do, which could be...
Yeah, and the elders...
Well, there's a part in the Bible where God, in the Old Testament, talks about child sacrifice. Like he sort of commands it in a way. Then later on, he does. Yeah. Them. So I thought this could be another example of that.
Well, no. Ezekiel doesn't say it was to scare them. He says that he gave you commands that you couldn't follow, namely sacrificing your children so that it might horrify you, right? So like the idea is that what you're trying to say right now is that God does give you bad commands. But to what I asked you, and I think what Eric's trying to get to as well, is how do you determine that this is one of those commands? Because God reiterated it over and over again. There's a bunch of places where God tells you these are the situations in which you execute your children.
Like the problem I have with this is what you're telling us, the way to interpret this text, the way to follow this text, to me sounds like the equivalent of, let's say I have a book and it's just full of like all these like terrible things that you're supposed to do for minor infractions. It just prescribes death and torture and all kinds of cruel and unusual punishments. And that's what the book says. It only says those kinds of things. And then people are like, wow, we can't form a society around this. And then somebody comes along and says, well, hey, but you don't understand the context. See, what you don't realize is that book was written on opposite day. So you're actually supposed to do all the opposites. All this stuff you're talking about the later redemption, that you're not supposed to actually follow the law is just meant to show, that's not in there anywhere. And like all these caveats you add to it, the thing you added just a little bit ago with the maybe it's analogous to the child sacrifice, like of Isaac, or this other example. It's not meant to be taken literally. Well, it doesn't say that anywhere in there. So as a handbook, I don't think that this is particularly all that good. Now, I think there are good things you can cherry pick in it. I think Jesus, he wasn't really a philosopher, but he is one of my favorite moral philosophers because I agree with a lot of the things he says. But again, if the book is supposed to, be good at this kind of thing, then all this hideous stuff that's in it that needs to be excused away with all of this reasoning that's not to be found by reading the text, but by having a particular worldview about some multi-thousand year arc that you then bake into it, that you read into it, is just not. It's not the kind of thing that you could or should form a society around. It's not the kind of thing that makes any logical sense to me or anything like that.
Yes, but in the story where God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, he doesn't sacrifice Isaac. God comes in the last second to stop it. It was a test of faith. Some of these laws could be interpreted
They lied
as
to
that.
him.
Like it's faith in God that you'll never even get to a situation.
But the problem we have is he tells you if you don't follow all the laws, every single one of them, he's going to punish you. And then we see in the Bible him punishing people for not following all of the laws. So like I'm inclined to believe that he wants you to follow the laws. He tells you to follow the laws. Like why would he punish you for not following the laws if he didn't want you to follow them?
Well, I told you this is like a test of faith. See how well do we follow these? Like the Old Testament, New Testament people.
But it doesn't say that.
On a
right
scale.
And you can't levy that expectation on people reading a book. All I did was do what it said, but you forgot the book was written on opposite day, right? You can't retreat to that kind of to that sort of defense. It's just not good.
Yeah. I want to do one other thing too for you, HC. You read like one or two passages with me, if you will. Do you have a Bible? I'm going to read something from Deuteronomy chapter 30. You probably think of the New Covenant era, like this idea of the New Covenant era when God is going to circumcise the hearts of the people. Did we learn about this in Ezekiel 44? We learn about it in Jeremiah, and we learn about it elsewhere. But it also comes up in Deuteronomy 30 when he talks about how the Israelites they're going to disobey. Because of their disobedience, God is going to send them into exile. And then after the exile, he's going to bring them back. And then he talks about what's going to happen when he finally circumcises their heart, right? It says, the Lord your God will bring you back into the land that your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. Moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, in order that you may live. Now listen, this is where it starts to get good. The Lord your God will put all of these curses on your enemies and on the adversaries who took advantage of you. Then you shall again obey the Lord, observing all of his commandments that I'm commanding you today. And the Lord your God will make you abundantly prosperous in all of your undertakings, in the fruit of your bodies, so on and so forth. And so the idea that he's laying out here is that finally, like when he comes and circumcises the heart of the people, it includes this idea that they're still going to follow the law. Do you see that? Like he never once does the lawgiver say, I don't want you to follow these laws.
Yes, but the law is like in our heart. We live out the law every single day. They're just making good moral choices.
No, he said the laws that I'm giving you today, right? It says in verse 8, then you shall again obey the Lord, observing all of his commandments that I'm giving you today. Meaning this is Moses speaking in Deuteronomy. Remember, it's the second giving of the law. So he's reiterating the law for all the Israelites to hear right before he dies and they enter into the promised land. So he's saying, all of these commands that I've given you today, eventually God's going to circumcise your hearts, and then he's going to want you to obey all of these commands. So they're not going to go away. And HC, you have to know that Jesus agrees with this. Jesus was a Judaizer. In Matthew 5, he says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish but fulfill. And he says, truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all is accomplished. And then listen to this. He says, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus' own words says that HC, if you practice the laws of Moses, that makes you great in the kingdom of heaven. Do you see that? Did we lose him? I think we lost him. Shit. I think his connection crapped out. Oh, wow.
They dropped.
It happens. Or they just dropped. It's hard to say. I feel bad. He was a kind young man, and I think he bit off more than he was ready for.
Yeah.
That happens, though. That happens. Well, friends, we're going to get our next caller up in here. And remember, we don't have super chats enabled on this live stream, but we are running we can't read any, but we are running a fundraiser for the Bat Cruise. Details are in the description of the video. It's also a link at tinycc.com/Bat Cruise. You can go and get your tickets. And also, since we're revisiting our announcements, let's give a big thank you out to the crew, everyone who makes the show possible, the audio engineers, everyone who's taking notes, screening calls, doing chat moderation, doing the video. Really appreciate you guys. None of this is possible without you. So big W. And we've got quite a few callers. We had earlier Melon try to get in. It looks like Melon is still in the queue. Let's get Melon up. Melon is asking, why is death a bad thing without gods? Melon, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you.
All right. So Melon, can you put some legs to that question for us before we answer? Do you want to flesh that out?
Okay, so I'm a Christian, but I've been trying to explore a bit. So I've been questioning the Bible and everything, and I stumbled upon like a live stream, and it said then try atheism. It's fun, and I started thinking like, what would be if I believe? What would the moral code be when I am an atheist? And I waited, not waited, but wait the moral stuff. And I come to the conclusion that in Christianity, like that can be like a very bad thing because like it's supposed, because like we have our responsibility, our goal. But in atheism, I don't really know if like that is actually a bad thing or not, because like life is basically suffering, and I think it's after all like the struggle, like the blissful moment, a few blissful moment that you have in life doesn't really like balance out the suffering.
Not to interrupt you, but
like you.
I'm just going to flesh one thing out real quick, and then I'm going to let Eric answer because I don't have a ton to say about this at the moment. But like, so in your worldview, you think death is bad too. So I think one of the things I would recognize first is that whether you're an atheist or a non-atheist, like even the Bible recognizes that death is like a bad thing, but the Bible rectifies it by saying it's okay, you'll be revived. Right. So the fact that you need to be revived, you need to be resurrected with the righteous, indicates that even the people in the Bible view death as being a negative experience. Now, that being said, as an atheist, I don't believe in like objective goods, objective bads. I think some atheists do. I just don't. So like when I say I think death is bad, you would just need to know that this is my opinion. This is something that I believe is bad, but I wouldn't say that death is objectively bad, because there are some people that actively seek out like end of life services where they might have a terminal illness, they might have something else, and they've decided that rather than wither away and suffer in a hospital room, they would rather go out on their own terms. And in those cases, you could theoretically say, well, the death is the best thing for them. But so I'm not making any objective claims, but I'd love to hear, Eric, if you have anything to say about this topic.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about it, depending on, and there's so many angles because it depends on what you mean by bad and what you mean by death. And I don't mean to sound like Jordan Peterson, but I think we do have to unpack that a little bit.
Death or the metaphysical substrate of death.
Well, it depends what you mean by death. So, Melon, like, for me as an atheist, there have been people in my life that have died. And so that's caused me huge amounts of grief. So, I can say that death is bad. Now, I assume that's not what you mean, but I would like to just hear what's your response to, like, I can make the claim, well, I don't like death. I obviously feel, a lot of negativity associated with it. So what would you say to that, for example?
I think like if the worldview of atheism, that is just something that is like maybe more like neutral stuff. So if someone died, I can just say it's just nature taking course.
So this
and
is what
also like you can continue.
Sure. So I think we're getting to I think I know what you mean now by in atheism there's nothing wrong with death. You don't mean death, you mean being dead. There's nothing wrong with being dead under atheism, because under atheism, when you're dead, you're not dead. Your subjective experience ends.
I'm not going to care.
So I can actually kind of agree with you on that, but that's not the same thing as that death or dying, the process of dying, is not a oftentimes miserable and an unenjoyable experience. That wouldn't mean that it's still not the case that like a sudden death of a young person who has their whole life ahead of them, that we don't feel a tremendous amount of grief about that, and that we can still think that somebody who was killed wrongfully, or they were assassinated or whatever, that we still don't see wrong in that as well. But it sounds like you're really just saying being dead, there's nothing wrong with that under atheism. Now, what I would say to that is, whenever I hear this, I think this is actually a little bit bizarre, because it can be flipped so much more effectively back on the theist, especially the Christian, because if there's an afterlife, and one of the possibilities of the afterlife is the worst imaginable thing, which is hell, then how would not the most pragmatic thing to possibly do be to race toward the complete eradication of all human life on planet Earth, so that no human can ever in the future go to hell? No other humans in the future can ever go to hell. So that's what I would want to hear your answer to. Why not just eradicate life? That way nobody can go to hell, which is objectively the worst thing.
I think because like God give us some responsibility, and God respect our free choice, and this is what I hear from my pastor, and he said that hell is not a place, it's like a state of mind, and like hell is also an absence of good, where everything that is good in our minds also get pulled. I cannot say like pulled out, but it's like it's a choice for me to separate everything from everything that is good.
Sure. Lots of Christians have lots of different ideas about hell. Yours is less of a fire and brimstone kind of hell, it sounds like, and more of the just separation from God kind of thing. We can talk about that too. I guess I'm going to go backwards a little bit on what I said, and I want to ask you, do you think what I boiled down your question to is correct, that you're more so saying that under atheism, being dead, there's nothing wrong with it, whereas in Christianity, being dead, because there are two possible options, heaven or hell, death is extremely consequential? Do you think that's a fair assessment of what you're telling us?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a accurate representation.
Yeah. So I guess that still kind of confuses me, because there's no reason that an atheist cannot value life. In fact, if life before death is the only life that you get, then it's the most meaningful thing imaginable, right? So I don't think atheism cheapens death. Honestly, I think theism cheapens life, because if you're going to live for an eternity in heaven, then nothing you do here on earth matters at all. And in fact, why not desire being smothered in the crib before the age of accountability, so you can guarantee that you're not going to end up in hell? The calculus just really doesn't actually make any sense to me.
Because like I will answer the in theism, and then I will answer I will ask in the worldview of in atheism. In theism, like everybody have their own value, everybody got their own responsibility, their own like way that God has chosen for them. So it's not for us to choose whether to end it or.
Well, can I say one thing about that? Because I've heard this a lot all my life, that like ending your own life would be some sort of a grave like sin in Christianity. But like Paul himself contemplates it in Philippians chapter 1. He says, for me, living is Christ and dying is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, yet I cannot say which I will choose. So when he's in prison, when he's writing to the Philippians, he's literally trying to figure out, I don't know if I'm going to go on living or not. Like he's literally deciding for himself. He's contemplating whether I want to end it now or keep going on. So like, I don't know of a single Bible verse that would tell you that like God would be upset if you decided to go home and see him.
What maybe this is a stretch, but I think it's Jesus. I think I remember the story about Jesus saving someone who is doing sin, and he said that the first one to throw a rock means that he is or she is sinless, and in that passage it showed that only God can like give it.
So you're referring to John chapter 8, right?
For your life, for the life. Yes.
So in John chapter 8, what happens is a woman is caught in adultery. They bring her before Jesus, and they want to put Jesus to the test, because up till now, Jesus has been very much pro-law of Moses and has tried to poo-poo the oral law, also known in the Bible as the tradition of the elders. So they find a really difficult case. They bring a woman up to him and said, this woman was caught in adultery. You know what the law of Moses says. You have to stone her. And so Jesus, not wanting to have her stoned, is like, okay, sure, but he who is without sin cast the first stone. Essentially what he's saying is, if you want to execute this woman, guess what? You're next. So you can do it, but just know if we're going to apply this rule evenly, you guys are next. I don't read anything in there about suicide.
I think it can be like two interpretation. I think there is.
I'm not sure I would add
for this.
I'm not sure I would add two interpretations, but listen, that's a side tangent. I just wanted to kind of point that out. God does seem to give you the free will to choose to carry on or not. And we're not told anywhere in the Bible that if you decide not to carry on, that he's just going to cast you to hell forever. But which is the other thing, you mentioned how like God gave you the free will, but like he doesn't really give you free will. Like he says, choose me or you get lit on fire for all of eternity. Like that's not free will. It's coercion at minimum. At best, it's like just some weird sadistic game.
Yeah, but if we grant that God is good, so God is everything that is good, that means that if for in end of my life, then I'm going to be one with God.
Well,
that means that
first of all, I don't know.
I'm all good, or at least I.
So I don't know why we would grant him that he's all good based on his behavior. Sorry, I'm not trying to overtalk you. It's just that our delay is kind of severe, so I'm not doing it on purpose. But The reality is, let's say, for example, that my son grows up and says, Dad, I don't want anything to do with you. Well, as a good father, I'm not going to say, okay, well, to hell with you, and then light him on fire. That's ridiculous, right? And if God's all powerful, he could do anything with us, like the people who don't want to spend eternity with him or the people who don't believe in him. He could do anything with us he wants to. He doesn't have to send us to hell. Hell is and heaven are a false dichotomy. There's a million other options between the two. So I don't buy this idea that, well, if you don't want to be with God, he has to light you on fire. That's not a real thing. Plus, I never said that I don't want to be with God. I just don't believe in the guy, right? And that's completely different. Not believing in something is different than looking it in the face and saying, nah, I don't want that.
Yeah, but that's going to be like a long conversation. But I think I'm going to, for now, stick to the moral question.
Yeah. Well, I was. Can we go back to this whole thing about death?
Was the first one? Yes, like I think what I want to ask about if I am living as atheist, like moral becoming like subjective, and then like what? So if someone told me if my morality is wrong, then what right does he have to tell me that my morality is wrong? And I don't think like anyone can prevent me to go all out. For example, like I just going to get some, I don't know, some white powder and
we're off to a good start.
And do all
unless you mean anthrax. White powder could mean different things, I guess.
Yeah.
So okay, Melon,
so,
with respect to this, so you're saying if I'm to live as an atheist, what's to stop the other atheist from saying whatever they say is moral, good, correct, or whatever from being the correct thing? Well, what's to stop any Christian from saying God told me we should do blank, so you can't tell me that it's wrong?
I mean, I think God loves us, and like he doesn't really want to do something that is unnecessary. So I think there's going to be a purpose. I think. So at least, yeah, it's a bad thing, but it's going to be like a purpose.
I'm not sure that's an answer to the question. I apologize, but I don't think that was an answer to the question. Can we try this again? Because I actually want to hear the answer.
I think I can ask it a different way by asking a couple of questions. So, Melon, do you think that a Christian can go to hell?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's not super common for people to say that they think a Christian can go to hell, but I appreciate that. So that derails where I was going to go with it a little bit. But anyways, so we'll go back to the original thing. If I'm to live life as a Christian, and Christians throughout the history of Earth have done things like endorse slavery, endorse, beating up kids. They've endorsed kicking Jews out of their country for whatever reason. I mean, Martin Luther, I think Martin Luther might have been one of his biggest influences based on the stuff he said. And even in the present day, you find Christians on like every spectrum of like the issues. I mean, you can read, that's how it is today, but also in the past, I mean, you can read some Aquinas and St. Thomas More, and they openly talk about how, if you steal from rich people, that doesn't actually count as theft. So we have this gamut of like extreme authoritarian right-leaning type of stuff to like extreme leftist type of stuff, all over the place with different people that claim to profess in the same sort of religion, or at least in the same figure of Jesus. So if I'm going to live life as a Christian, and a Christian says, well, I think we should do these specific things, and all of those things are counter to what I believe, but we're both Christians, how do we settle this dilemma of who to agree with, who to follow?
I think we go back to the Bible and like we reconcile the difference. I mean,
But that's what
the
that
Bible is
person's
just
gonna do.
yeah, but that's
So,
just I think that's just a story. For example, so
Melon, let me. I want
Bible
to.
is a story.
I want to help illustrate what Peterson's saying here, right? So the Martin Luther advocated for confiscating the property of all the Jews and burning down their synagogues. He wrote a whole book about it called On the Jews and Their Lies. So, like, this is a man who rooted his moral system in the biblical text. That's why he was one of the biggest reformers of the church, right? So, if we're outsiders and we're looking at the objective morality of Christianity, and we've got one guy saying, yeah, let's confiscate all the property of the Jews and burn their houses down, which has been Christian teaching for almost all of Christendom. As far back as the Edicts of Theodosius II, we were seeing this same type of persecution of the Jews, right? But now we've got, let's say we've got Melon, and Melon says, no, we shouldn't be doing these things to the Jews, right? What good is the objective moral doing for us if we don't know what is the objective moral? We still have to just fight it out using our own subjective opinions.
Honestly, I don't really know, but But
right? Because like
I think I got an inkling of it though.
Because even if there was an objective moral code we can point to and say, look, these are the objective moral codes, like they still need interpreted. So they're not really all that helpful. At the end of the day, we're stuck with our own mind and we have to apply it and think to ourselves what makes the most sense. And people have been doing it for all of history. That's why for most of history, people have thought it was okay to own slaves. And now we're like, no, we shouldn't be doing that. Even the biblical authors agreed, yes, slavery's fine. In fact, some of the earliest Christians like Ambrose literally wrote that it's an unavoidable consequence and some people aren't fit for freedom. So, but nowadays we would look at that and say, that's crazy. How could anyone say that, right? But the reality is, like, if we treat the Bible like an authoritative, objective moral rule book, then we're stuck with this idea that slavery is permissible, right? So I think, my personal opinion, I think even though subjective morals aren't perfect, sometimes we make decisions that are stupid. Sometimes we screw the pooch. However, I think it's better than being stuck with a book that says slavery is okay and you can never question it for all of eternity.
I don't really know where it say like the slavery is okay. Can you give me a Bible verse so I can maybe look it up later?
Yeah, check out Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. I think that's the most striking passage. And there's others, but I think this is one that best kind of demonstrates the situation. He goes on prior to that in verse 39 to 43, and he tells you, don't make slaves of your own fellow brother Hebrews. But he says, as for the male and female slaves who you may have, it's from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and from their families who are with you, who have been born in your land. They may be your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property forever. So he tells you explicitly, these foreigners over here, hey, you just own them as property forever. It's fine.
Okay, the way I see it is like with the context, like it's like what's happened that day. It's the best for what possible to. It's the best possible things to do at the time, and I think like the Bible is, especially the Old Testament, is just a story, a warning for us, and Jesus. That's why like Jesus say like. Jesus come and like say like, yeah, I came to fulfill the law, and you don't really need to follow this law anymore, for example.
Was it the best possible thing for the Israelites to be slaves in Egypt?
I mean, that's not the best thing, but that's
okay.
And say that it's a
God didn't want that. God didn't want. Did God want his people to be slaves, or did he want them to be free?
I mean, yes, but I think he punished them because he wants them to feel like how it feels to become a slave.
Okay, but one is more preferable to the other, right?
I mean, if you say
Is
that's
being
what,
is
I don't
being
really
a
know.
is being a free person more preferable than being a slave?
I don't really know. I mean, I can be,
You don't.
for example, if I'm being like a
Okay,
forced
well,
slave,
so
and then
I,
and then
I
I'm
don't.
treated like, I'm sorry, it's not like I'm dishonest, but I really don't know if I am being a slave, but I'm treated very, very good. For example, I got my wage, I got
Well,
wage, I
slaves don't
can
get
help my
wages.
family,
That's
and I have
that's
under
employment.
protection.
Melon, that's not slavery.
But
That's employment.
in Egypt,
Like
people
slaves,
say, yeah, but in
slaves didn't
Egypt they
get
pay the
paid,
slave
and they got beaten
to
with a
build the
rod if
pyramid.
they disobeyed. So you're describing somebody who is an employer and an employee, and you're not describing someone who's a slave. So he explicitly tells you just before the verse we read, he says, if any who are dependent on you become so impoverished that they sell themselves to you, you shall not make them serve as slaves. He's talking about the Hebrews. It says they shall remain with you as hired or bound laborers. They shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children with them shall go out from your authority. Then they should go back to their family and return to their ancestral property, because they are my servants who I brought out of Egypt, and they shall not be sold as slaves are sold, and you shall not rule over them with harshness, but you shall fear your God. And then he says, but here are the slaves that you are allowed to have. So he says, the Hebrews, don't turn your Hebrew brothers into slaves. That's not the preferred thing for you guys. I don't want that. These foreigners, you can own the foreigners. So God knows that the more preferable state is to be free. But he says you can own these other people as property.
I don't really know actually so much about the Old Testament. I knew more about the New Testament, but yeah, I think I'm going to look this up, and then I'm going to wait again, like what's life when if I become an atheist. But still, like I think like I have not really got the answer before, like why people can stop, how people can tell me like what to do when I'm an atheist. Like there's
Sure,
no absolute moral, and their moral is just subjective for them.
Yeah, I was going to go back to this.
Why
with
can
you,
I just,
Melon,
for example,
actually.
become a crime boss? Yes.
Melon, does God have reasons for why he prescribes specific commandments, taboos, whatever?
God gives a specific commandment to taboos.
Does God have reasons for why he tells us to do anything or to not do certain things?
I mean, yeah, I think God has a plan.
Okay, well, then if that's how morality works, then we can appeal to reason, and we have absolutely no need for a God. If God is telling us to do specific, there are arguments that people try to use, like, well, you know, the whole thing about don't eat pork is because of trichinosis or whatever that is, this horrendous parasitic worm that you can get from undercooked pork. Oh, that was the reason behind that. Well, okay, any 21st century person could pick up the most basic of medical books and find that kind of information out. So we don't need a cosmic, moral, magical lawgiver that lives in the sky. We can just know that kind of thing. Or how about, that hardly sounds really like a moral claim, don't eat pork, but I mean, if the man upstairs is telling you not to do it, then you better not do it. So it kind of does sound like it. But something more obvious as like a moral command would be, don't commit perjury. It doesn't actually say don't lie. It says don't lie under oath. So it's like perjury. Or don't murder, don't steal. Well, I think even an idiot could understand that a society that openly endorses do as much stealing, lying, and killing as you want would be a society that would collapse. So there's just a very obvious sociological, biological, and I guess you could say civic understanding for why you wouldn't want to do those three things either. And so, again, by appealing to reason, we can come up with perfectly valid justifications for the same sorts of moral commandments that God gives. And we can skip the middleman and appeal to reason. So God's not required for any of this. And you kind of have to establish what, I guess, the things you value are. But in a lot of instances, it kind of sounds like a lot of the time God values the same kinds of things we do. And I think that's because ordinary human beings wrote the Bible. So it would be reflective of the kinds of things humans like and prefer. There's a lot of really the I am a jealous God type of stuff in there too. So yeah, you absolutely don't need a society that has a rule that you have to worship this one thing because it's a vengeful, jealous thing. You can completely do away with that and have a flourishing society, obviously. So what would you say to that? All we have to do is appeal to reason and skip the middleman, because God has reasons for these things.
God of the Old Testament was an absolute beast, I think. But I think the biggest question for when living in atheism state is that why should I care about society
I can answer you that.
I can say that it's for the good of the masses, but I don't really think like society is good for me, or like society. I don't really care. Why should I care about society? If, for example,
should I care about
in 80
your
years,
religious cause? Why should I care about your religion?
I mean, because there's like a 50-50 chance of God, I think.
No, I put that pretty damn close to zero. But like to the point though, like why should I as an atheist care about society? Because I live and die in that society. Like I'm a part of the society, right? That's like saying my finger hurts today, so I'm just going to cut the finger off. Well, shit, the finger is part of my body, right? So like there's nothing we can do at this point in history to not be part of a society. We're going to be part of that society, right? So if we want ourselves to have well-being, then we need to care about the society that we are a part of.
Yeah. But I think there's like a good society and bad society, right? For example, I can join the mafia or some type of gang and say that this is my society, and my society is like the thing that I care about. So fuck F the government, for example. I don't really care.
You can fucking cuss here, don't worry.
Do what I want. Oh, sorry.
So, go ahead, bud.
I wanted to go back a little bit, Melon, and I wanted you to try to address if God has reasons for telling us, for giving us commandments or whatever, like do these things and don't do these other sorts of things. If there are reasons behind them, then why couldn't an atheistic society just appeal to reason instead and just say we don't need to get this from a God? Like, what is your response to that?
Because I think God set the goal, and the goal is good. I mean, it doesn't tell us about the method, so we might, so we are free to interpret it in our own method.
What is the goal, though?
The goal is, for example, like the 10 Commandments. Like he tells us in 10 Commandments.
Melon, what is the goal?
The goal.
Yep.
The goal is, I think, being like, I think in the 10 Commandments, I think like the most basic one, that I think the most clear one that we have. The 10 Commandments.
There's any goals in the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, I think the 10th commandment's elucidating, though, where it says that you shouldn't covet your neighbor's slave. It's kind of a weird thing to enshrine in some sort of objective moral law code. Seems like you should just say don't own slaves.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I just want to say one other thing, Melon. What I'm hearing as you're dialoguing with Eric and whatnot, what I'm hearing is that like you don't like the way subjective morals work, right? Because that means we have to disagree in the marketplace of ideas. And that means sometimes people disagree and they make horrible decisions. And we get that. We understand that in like a subjective framework, sometimes people make moral decisions that we don't like. But again, this is still, you don't have to like it, but it not only can you not demonstrate objective morals exist, but number two, you can't demonstrate what they are. You can't tell me where they actually are, because I guarantee if we read the objective morals of the Bible, you're not going to like them. Number three, if the morals of the Bible are the standard, they're not even objective. They're just subjective, which means you don't believe in objective morality. You just believe in divine command theory. And at that point, why are you picking the divine commands of the Bible as opposed to the Quran and so on and so forth, right? Because now you're saying, well, here's the objective law code here, but the Muslims would, no, I've got the objective law code here. So now you're right back at square one. You've got a bunch of people arguing using their own subjective thinking faculties saying, no, this is the objective code. No, this is the objective code, right? So just claiming that atheists can't appeal to objective morals doesn't fix any of the problem. At the end of the day, you're in the same boat we're in. You have to sit down at the table. You have to come to the marketplace of ideas, and you have to make a case for why your moral framework is the one that people should follow.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's clear up a lot of confusion, because like I don't think it's more like I don't like it. It's more like I'm confused, like what to follow when I'm in atheism.
Well, sometimes we don't know either.
Clear things up.
Like, so Eric and I both face moral dilemmas. And one of the first ones I face as an atheist is this idea that like I'm readjusting my moral framework. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I should be eating animals. Like this is something that I'm now trying to figure out, right, in my worldview. And we're always learning. Like that's not to say that you're going to become an atheist or you might become some other religion and you're just going to know what is correct moral behavior. We're all trying to figure it out together, right? So, but I think us getting together as a society and trying to figure this stuff out has always been more effective than pointing at a book from the Bronze Age that says, yeah, you can kidnap women and rape them as long as you're in war. So like, I just don't know if pointing to a religious text helps you to decide what is moral behavior.
And the world, I'm currently reading this book.
At least we have a goal.
Yeah, sorry, we have that delay. I'm currently reading this book called, you'd think I'd remember what it's called, but An Anatomy of Violence, the biological roots or causes of crime, something like that. And it confronts us with all these really fantastical and really, really kind of uncomfortable moral considerations we have to make in the complex world that we live in. Because we now know, for example, there have been cases. For example, you have two identical twins. One of them is, and they've kind of been the same their whole life. They're identical twins. You would expect that. But then one of them just kind of later in life drifts off and starts to kind of become a low life and a loser. And this person one day kills somebody. And then, well, we all have the moral intuition that, well, taking a life probably deserves the taking of that life. Or if you don't believe in the death penalty, at least like life in prison or whatever. This is an unrehabilitatable person. I don't know if that's a word or not, but I'm going to say that it is. Well, what we have found out now, thanks to technology, is somebody can have a tumor pressing on maybe like their vagus nerve, or it's in the nucleus accumbens region or something like that, that is basically causing this person to become a completely deranged psychopath. And maybe that's treatable. And once this person has been treated, they go back to being just like their other twin, who is just by all accounts an upstanding citizen. So now we're confronted with this really bizarre thing where, can we actually have sympathy for people that have committed murder or something like that? Well, if we just try to rely on the Bible is a book that doesn't change, and it's very black and white, and it's very primitive. But the world is going to continue growing more and more complex, and we're going to learn extraordinary things like that. And complex societies are going to put us into extremely complex situations and kind of moral gray areas like that. And if we just looked at the Bible, then we would have that very black and white sort of dichotomous thinking of, nope, if X, then do Y. And I just don't think in the modern world, when you really dig into these kinds of things, that we can actually legitimize that text as a proper instruction manual for every kind of morality, for like general kinds of morality. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can cherry pick that's pretty decent, but that would just be another example, kind of to piggyback off of what Justin was saying. Like there's stuff that happens every day that we have to be confronted with.
Yeah. So Melon, we spent a little bit of time in this call, and so we've got some others waiting to get in, so we're going to move on. But I want to give you the last word. Tell me some of your thoughts on talking what Eric was just talking about.
I think he clears up my view of like morality being subjective, even in the Bible also. Like even though like I thought there was like one clear goal in the Bible, but then like this clear goal also like becomes some kind of blurry. And I think Justin really like put the words into order in my head, and I think it's all clear up, I think. And yeah, I think morality is possibly like relative, and we don't really know.
I agree. Well, Melon, thanks for calling
So
in. We
much,
appreciate the phone call. It was a good question.
My question.
All right. Cheers, buddy.
Yeah. Cheers.
W for Melon for asking some questions and actually trying to probe under the surface of some of the answers. Before we bring in our next caller, we're going to grab Atheist John from California. We're not reading any super chats today, but we are raising funds for sending our hosts to the Bat Cruise. If you go to the bottom of the video on the screen, you'll see a button to donate. I've already donated, so we would love to see everyone participating. We've got over 1,000 people here. If everyone just sent one coffee, even half a coffee, we're done. We got everybody to the Bat Cruise. But we love and appreciate everyone here and everything that you do for the channel. So don't feel compelled to give if you can't give. But if you have some change to spare, we'd love for you to help out with the fundraiser. And with that, let's get John into the guest box. John is from California. He says, I believe in original interpretation of the Bible. Also, nobody knows what the Lord's Prayer means. John, welcome in.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you, John?
I'm doing pretty good. Hey, before we
John,
start, I actually
is your interpretation of the Lord's Prayer that bread is God and that the Lord's Prayer is teaching that everybody should get free bread?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, listen, you're an adorable troll, but stop calling in. If you ever call in on this show, I'll drop you before you even get on the stage. What you're doing is not funny. It's just annoying at this point.
I was going to.
All right, and then we're going to grab our next guest, which is Howard, a theist from Spain, saying, observing the golden ratio through nature is scientific evidence of a creator.
Oh, boy.
I'll be excited. Eric, this is you, buddy. You got to deal with this one. Okay, so Howard, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome in, Howard. And I'm reading the call notes. It says, observing the golden ratio through nature is scientific evidence of a creator. Do you believe in a generic creator, or do you believe in like a specific creator, like the creator of the Bible or the Quran or something else?
I haven't decided. I'm searching for truth, and I'm just following the evidence. So I guess that would be generic, yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so go ahead and kind of lay out your case for the golden ratio pointed to God. I'd be curious to hear how you fleshed everything out, and then I'm going to let Eric tackle this because he's going to do way better than I can ever hope to.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so for anyone that isn't aware of what the golden ratio is, it's digitalized as 1.618 ... It's an infinite number sequence, and it's what we see throughout nature. Nature tends to aim towards this golden ratio. We see it geometrically in spirals, the placement of seeds, and generally like the growth and scale. So that's why it's called the golden ratio. So like we can see in like pineapples and pine cones that there's always a spiral going clockwise and a spiral going anti-clockwise, and they tend to be the Fibonacci numbers, which are the numbers that help us get closer to the golden ratio. Because it's an infinite number, it's a number that we'll never know the full digits of. And we also see this not just in spirals, but also we see it, in spirals like the Romanesco broccoli. We see it in snowflakes. We even see the ratio in like the chicken egg, where it's 1 across to 1.618 across. And we know that eggs are really hard to break. And it also happens to be the best possible ratio for placement, the best possible ratio for growth. If we have like a propeller underwater, the best possible ratio for that to have the most force is the golden ratio, and it just happens to be what we see in nature. So I'd like to ask you guys, how can you say it's not rational? Well, how can you say it's rational to dismiss this evidence for intelligent design?
Well, I mean, the biggest problem is that intelligent design isn't a working theory. Intelligent design did not predict that we should be able to look to nature to find technological solutions. That's just a retrofitting of data onto an explanation. So that would be like the number one thing.
Can I word it differently, Eric, just to see if I can get the answer a bit more clarified? Could you cite any alternative example of random chance producing reproducible perfection? Because it literally is the best possible ratio that you could.
I've never heard that you use the golden ratio to create the best possible propeller design. I've never heard that specific claim before. So I would like to see a study on that. I don't think I'm not going to Google during midstream here, because then I won't be talking and this is a call-in show. So that's not really what the people want. But what I can tell you, you're giving a very strawman-y presentation of the alternative. If a God doesn't exist and everything is just blind random chance, no, that's not the case at all. Things in the universe happen according to natural law. I don't really draw any distinction between the laws of physics and whatever natural law is supposed to be, me personally. But if we take chemistry and life, why do compounds form chemical bonds? Because they're always trying to reduce their energy state or whatever. A real scientist would probably be able to put that in better terms. But why is a bubble always spherical? Because that has maximizes the surface area to volume ratio. Even when you start combining bubbles together and you can get cool like tesseract patterns, the bubble, like the surface area of those bubbles will always maximize or like minimize in energy, right? Now, life is a chemical system. It does the same kinds of things at a very reductionist level. Life is just chemistry. And so we can look to, the reason we see this the golden ratio phenomena is because it's a ratio of Fibonacci numbers. Now, and life is all about conserving energy, right? So like a Fibonacci sequence. You know what that is, right, Howard?
Yeah, I mentioned it before, didn't you hear?
Okay.
That's what we see in the
I didn't
pine
hear
cones and the
Fibonacci, but
pineapples.
Yep, I'll take your word for it. So if
Yeah.
like organisms, because they grow and develop, they do things. There's like a causal link, right? There's a chain of events for the way an organism grows, whether it's those cool succulents that grow in that spiral pattern, or a pine cone, or a nautilus shell. I have a nautilus shell, but it's in the other room. Otherwise, I'd hold it up on stream here. Well, if what you're doing, like the way an organism or a part of an organism grows in those, like a series of iterative steps, the next thing you do is based on prior things. So you're just naturally going to see a Fibonacci sequence. There's this weird, like, there's this, not like, I don't know what to call it. We pretend that numbers, like we glorify numbers in these weird kind of ways. Like, oh, it's like we see for the Fibonacci sequence, like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Well, but you can create a number out of anything. I can say that there are, I'm not going to count them, 15 pencils or whatever right here, or I can say there's one cluster of pencils right here. And an organism can be like that when it's made of tissue and the tissue is growing, and in order to make the organism or the part of it or whatever get bigger, because the way that occurs is through these iterative steps, you're going to see something like a Fibonacci sequence result from that. And it's not because the numbers or anything are magical. It's because you're just doing one thing after the other. So these golden ratios, yeah, sometimes they're seen that way. From what I've seen, though, so much of the golden ratio stuff it's not really a golden ratio. It's a golden ratio if you fudge the numbers, if you round up or down to force a golden ratio to fit. Like they do that with the human face. I was like, well, based on, I can't remember exactly where you draw the lines for it, but it's like, okay, well, if it's like where the nose is, okay, do I go from the very tip of the nose or the base of the nose or what? Like you can completely subjectively pick wherever your starting and ending point is for so many of these measurements to make something that if you round it up or down is kind of close to that golden ratio. So, I mean, that's a lot. I can say a lot more, but I'll give you an opportunity to. What's up?
Thanks. I just wanted to quickly ask, because I mentioned that nature aims towards the golden ratio, because we only see perfection in number. We don't see it in nature.
Well,
what I think on my main point. Can I just quickly say one thing?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Say again?
No, go ahead. I want you to finish. I was going to say, when you finish, I got something to say about that.
Cool. I wasn't originally saying that this is irrefutable proof of intelligent design. I was asking how can you rationalize dismissing this as evidence for intelligent design when we think of Occam's razor? Surely my explanation is way more simple than what you're theorizing, Eric.
So let me just add two things to this, because I think Occam's razor is something that some people appeal to. They don't really need to, but in this case, you already did. But I think it sides with us, right? So if in fact things are stronger when they evolve to have a Fibonacci sequence, like let's just imagine that is the case, right? Well, that matches what we see in evolution. The things that have the best chances of survival are the things that are going to reproduce, and the things that have a lower chance of survival are the things that are not going to be able to reproduce. So that being the case, then what we would expect to see is a high frequency of items that follow the Fibonacci sequence. And I think that being said, we would say the opposite then about God, because if God created all this nonsense here, right? What that means is if the Fibonacci sequence is like the best possible way to create stuff, then what that means is the majority of everything God ever created, he decided to not use the most preferred method, even with humans. He decided not to use the most preferred method mathematically to create us, but he cared about broccoli for some reason.
All right, Justin, I get what you're saying, but can I just remind you, I'm not just talking about the Fibonacci numbers. I'm also talking about the ratio itself in construction, the growth, you know, how things scale and growth, and also in how we see these angles and spirals. And we, you know, it's not just the Fibonacci numbers. I mean, doesn't that give lend more evidence or more
in terms of
strength to this as evidence? Because it's not just Fibonacci numbers, it's the ratio, it's the angle of the spirals.
The angles are not preferred. So I want to make sure and attack the first part, which is that the Fibonacci sequence is not the preferred like building sequence for strength. Like, so like I'm an engineer, had to take engineering classes. I'm an electrical engineer, but early on we had to take lots of mechanical courses as well. I'm pretty aware that like the most mechanically sound systems are not systems that are built around the Fibonacci sequence. Or so we would see them in bridges. We would see them in homes. Are they effective? Yes. Arches we proved were effective way back in ancient Rome, but are they the most efficient and most effective ways to build things? No, they're not. We've actually got better things. So like saying that we've got this Fibonacci sequence and somehow it's like the best of everything. It's just not.
Well, as you mentioned evolution, and I'm really glad that Erica mentioned about a seashell, because that's where we see the spirals most visually, most easily. You guys are aware that some of these fossils are classed as ancient fossils. So, you know, without arguing about timelines, I'm just saying, if these are ancient fossils and they're showing the phi ratio, the spiral of the golden ratio, the phi, in a spiral angle, well, doesn't that kind of lend more evidence that there wasn't no evolution? Because we see the Fibonacci numbers, the golden ratio in construction, and also the spirals now, and we see them in fossils, which you class as ancient as well. So doesn't that kind of show that there wasn't any evolution from then till now?
No, and I'm very happy to get into that, but you've said a lot of things, and I wrote that one down so we can come back to it a little bit later. But so earlier when you were talking, you're referencing this golden ratio and perfection. You specifically mentioned perfection. Literally, I don't think anything is perfect. You brought up intelligent design, which I want to get in. I want that to be the next thing we get into. But the Occam's razor comment you made, I don't think you're understanding this very well. So you think that you are preserving Occam's razor because you're invoking a creator that creates these things that follow a Fibonacci sequence, express a golden ratio or whatever. You specifically mentioned chicken eggs earlier. So Howard, do you think that a literal miracle occurs every time a chicken egg forms?
You're talking to a creationist, so obviously the answer would be yes. Whenever there's conception, I believe it's a miracle, yeah.
Okay, what about a snowflake? Every time a snowflake forms, do you think a literal miracle occurs?
Oh, God bless you. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention snowflakes also, so the phi ratio and Fibonacci, not Fibonacci, sorry, but what do you got, fractal. Every snowflake, when you look at it under a microscope, is different, but every single snowflake has 5, I guess you'd call it arms, stemming out from the center, 6. And 5 is how you get to phi. It's the magical number, which again ties all back to an intelligent designer, leaving a signature mark for those with eyes to see, I believe. Sorry.
Okay. So the question was, do you think a literal miracle occurs every time a snowflake forms?
Yes, because they're all different, okay. Like the pupils of our eyes, no two the same, but they're all geometrically perfect.
Right. Every dump I've taken, they're all, every turd is completely different too. That's not an argument. So do you understand that we, like with the water molecule, we understand the bond angles. And so we know why scientifically a snowflake is very, very likely to form a 6-sided shape. Are you aware of that? That's all I'm asking.
Sorry, could you rephrase that? again? Or could you just
Are you
do that again?
aware that we know
Okay.
scientifically, because of the shape of the water molecule, what the type of bond geometry a water molecule will form with other water molecules? Are you aware that we scientifically know that? And so we already know why, like we have a scientific understanding of why they would be inclined to form six-sided shapes?
Unlike your turds, so they do have a pattern, but they're all uniquely different at the same time. So back to your argument, you've got a good argument, I'll give you that, but I could argue that God
I
designed
haven't
water
gotten anywhere
be like
close
that.
to finishing my argument yet. You don't know what my argument is at the moment. So
Sorry, I meant your conclusion. Sorry.
You don't know my conclusion yet because I haven't given it. So I don't think you actually think a literal miracle occurs every time a snowflake forms, because a literal miracle suspends the laws of nature and certainly the laws of physics, because a creator doesn't use the laws of physics to do anything. It's literally supernatural. Okay. So no, I don't think that, I don't even think you think that a literal miracle occurs every time a chicken forms an egg, every time a snowflake forms. And so you and I actually think the same way. When we look out there and we see that, broccoli grows that certain way that it does, that shells coil in the certain way they do, we both think that when a snowflake forms the shape it does, we both think that it does that because the laws of nature, the laws of physics, whatever, are set up in a way that that's how it manifests. Now, what you do, and again, we were talking about, this is all about Occam's razor. What you do is you attach the most complex imaginable thing, a supernatural creator that's responsible for all of it, and that's why we see those things. You're very plainly the one violating Occam's razor when you do that, because we will agree fundamentally about, how those structures form and that they're like describable through physics or whatever, but then you're adding the other thing. So you're the one in violation here.
Well, I disagree, but with all respect, yeah, I meant to say I disagreed with your premise before, but fair enough. We can agree to disagree. I mean, my main point, like I said, but that you said you wanted to get back to anyway, was as we see it in fossils, which you guys class as ancient, doesn't that show that there hasn't been any evolution if we see it in fossils and we see it in life now?
No,
absolutely not. There were, because you don't know that the shells are the same thing, right? Like, I don't know. T-Rex walked on two legs. I walk on two legs. Therefore, no evolution has occurred. Like to point to some random cherry-picked generic phenotype and say, oh, because I see preservation of that trait across different species across time, therefore evolution isn't a thing. That is terribly naive.
Again, I agree to disagree because I can't see what's illogical about what I'm saying. If we see the same perfect ratio in the past that we see now, then that shows me there hasn't been no evolution in that aspect. It's as if
you keep attributing perfect. Yeah, thank you. Eric and I have the same question. You keep saying it's perfect, but it's not perfect. Like you're just asserting that it is. We don't agree with that premise that it's perfect by any means. What's it perfect for?
Well, the YouTube channel Numberphile, they really show some really good videos about how perfect the golden ratio is mathematically and how nature does aim towards that, and that's why nature survives.
If it's effective, yes, but you're saying it's perfect. So what do you mean by perfect?
That it's the best ratio of construction. It's the best possible
for what?
Ratio for
Howard,
this. What do you call it?
It's an irrational
when you put out seeds, you look at a sunflower and you see the seeds.
Right, but best for what is what I'm asking.
It's the best possible scale. It's the best possible
I mean, by scale,
like I
it
say,
comes in
for-
all
for strength,
sizes.
it's the best part to move. Right, for a structure, sorry, I'm not explaining myself very well, I'm a bit dyslexic. A structure to be as strong as possible, it would have to go up or down in the golden ratio. And we can see this
We already
mathematically
covered
with
this. Like,
Mandelbrot stuff.
structures are
It
much
goes in and out
stronger.
Infinitely.
Structures are much stronger in like a geodesic form or typically in like a triangular format because you can distribute the loads more appropriately than you could with like some sort of golden ratio. And we don't even know how you could implement the golden ratio into some sort of a mechanical structure like a building. How would you even do that? There's not even a method for it.
If you had a golden ratio arc or arch,
all the ancient
it wouldn't
buildings
be symmetrical. It would not bear load consistently. That would be a terrible design choice, actually. But this whole thing about that it's perfect, the golden ratio is irrational. Why can't I just say that only a rational number would be perfect? How can there be perfection in an irrational number? That doesn't make any sense.
Sounds rational to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's irrational to us appears to have been designed from something that's outside of our physical space and time, because the pi number is also infinite, and that has patterns inside its code, inside its number sequence itself, which I'd have to show you. I can't really get into that now.
Anything that is round has the ratio of pi in it. That is just a natural consequence of being round. It requires no further deeper explanation at all. That is just a property of things that are circular. Man, what else did I write down from my notes?
Before we jump into that, can I? Okay.
Well,
there's really nothing more to get into with that.
Yeah, there's not much else. I want to hear what else was in his notes before we get lost on another tangent. And we've got another caller that wants to get in. So we've got a hard cutoff at 7:30. So I want to make sure we can get to our next caller. But go ahead, Eric.
So, Howard, do you understand that intelligent design isn't a working theory? It doesn't make any predictions.
Well, I predict that everything in the future will have the golden ratio, because if it doesn't, that would be de-evolution. So there's a prediction for you, which would also disprove evolution.
Your golden ratio in this
turns out without the golden ratio in the future.
Howard, I just crumpled up this piece of paper. Is there a golden? Do you think there's a golden ratio in this?
You're not God, but if I can just ask one last question, a quick one to Justin.
Well, everything in the future will have the golden ratio.
So I just want to address what you said real quick before you move on to your last question, which is like you're suggesting that the preferred state is that everything is made from the golden ratio. But if you are a believer in a God who designed things, and then he didn't use the preferred design method, then he's just kind of a goof. Well, why would he have this perfect design method and then just not use it everywhere?
I'm not a Christian, but what's that argument that you know it better than me, that from the fall, due to sin, there's corruption and abomination and stuff. But like I say, I'm not a Christian. I see a lot of religions talking about the Garden of Eden and the serpent. Seem
to be a Christian. Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that, like, you're saying we need this theistic concept to explain the golden ratio, because we see it pop up, and the golden ratio is like the most preferred way to do things. But irregardless of the fall, even before the fall, God didn't use the golden ratio to build everything. Like, animals didn't become fundamentally different after the fall. Like, animals were still animals. Mankind still had ribs. Like, the structure of our ribs didn't change. That's ridiculous.
Well, again, I could argue, if you look up the video on YouTube, the mathematical model of the universe, that God did use the golden ratio and pi to create the universe. So that's something you could look into another time.
We'll certainly do some of that homework later. So what was the last thing you wanted to ask?
Cool. I think you'll enjoy this point. So you're aware that supposedly Jesus lived to 33 to live a perfect life cycle in the Quran, the Bible, even the Gnostics. I think everyone agrees that he was 33 years old, yeah?
I mean, roughly 33, but it depends on what you think about his birth. Was he born before 4 BCE during the reign of Herod, or was he born during the census of Quirinius 10 years later? So when we talk about the age of Jesus' death, we don't exactly know how old he was. We have to use our best guess.
I hate to ask, but what's perfect about the
I
number
appreciate
33?
that. Well, here's...
You did it, Peterson. Why would you do it?
If I may, well, I'm just about to get there, Erica, don't worry. So yeah, Freemasons love 33 degrees. But my main point was, if we say that Jesus is known to be 33 years old, maybe it's not a coincidence that the sun and the moon realign with each other every 33 years. The Son of God was 33 years to do a perfect life cycle. Well, the other Son of God also takes 33 years to do a perfect cycle with the moon. And in pi, like I was saying, the first number 0 appears in the 33rd position of the number sequence. And you've got 33 vertebrae in your spine, which is supposed to be the Jacob's stairway to heaven. So it's just interesting how God leaves numbers in certain places for people to.
But we can do that with any number. There's no number that we can't look at and just say, look, it shows up in all these situations. Like you're just saying, here's a number and it shows up a lot. Cool. All the numbers do. This is like saying, oh, I bought a Volkswagen. Now that I've got a VW, all I do is notice other VWs on the road. It's a miracle that we have all these VWs. No, like you're just practicing a form of pareidolia where now you're just saying, here's a number I like. Where else can I find it? That's a meaningless and futile endeavor. Well, all you're doing at this point is just like convincing yourself of deeper and deeper levels of nonsense.
And also, I said earlier,
I appreciate your opinion. Did you know about the sun and the moon taking 33 years, or is that new to you?
They don't. They take about 32.8 years. But this is what I was talking about earlier. I asked you, do you know that intelligent design isn't science and that it's not a working theory and that all it is retrofitting things? And I don't even remember what you said to that, but for crying out loud, what you just said is the perfect tell of that. The creator of the entire universe coded in the number of vertebrae we have something about how long Jesus lived for. That's not a prediction. That's just a Texas sharpshooter fallacy, and a really wild and silly one at that. And it's another subjective one because you'd have to include the sacrum and the coccyx to get to 33. Your spine is your cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebra, and we have 24 of those. You're picking things out and saying, oh, geez, these disconnected things are connected with no evidence that they're connected in any way. There's no explanatory mechanism here whatsoever. It's just, well, what if that thing that if you kind of close your eyes and don't look is similar to that thing over there? What if they're connected? You're just making stuff up.
I don't know if you know this, but like number 69 shows up in nature all over the place.
And it's in the Kama Sutra. Therefore, it was divinely inspired.
Yeah, of course.
It's divinely inspired. Well, listen, Howard, I think we've had quite a bit of conversation, and I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But the problem is we're running out of time, and I want to get to the next guest. So please call in. You know, the show will be live again, obviously, next week. We'd love to hear from you again in the future. If we had more time, I'd love to keep you on because I think you're a delightful person to talk to. I think you're kind. It's just that we've unfortunately right now we've got to move on to the next guest. But I appreciate you calling in.
Thank you. Can I formally challenge you to a debate on a neutral platform, a moderated debate?
No.
I've been speaking to James. and he'd be happy to host it. It's because I think it'd be great
I'll
to
pass.
show some
So,
visuals with the evidence that I've got.
so
How about Angie and
Howard, every monkey and his uncle wants to debate me on MDD, and I don't. There's no benefit for me to be on the platform. I love James's platform, but I have my own channel that I do my own content on, and that supports the work that I do. If I have somebody who wants to debate a really good topic, like a really great topic that needs to be debated, then I agree to it. But other than that, no, I don't just debate, any guy on the internet that wants me to get on MDD. You have to earn that spot, and I don't think you've shown that you've earned it during this call. But we appreciate you calling in.
Well, I did.
All right, let's grab Richard from California. Richard, I think, is an atheist or maybe an agnostic. It says, is the dictionary definition of the word creation proof that the world is a creation? Should be a lot of fun. How you doing, Richard?
I'm doing great. I've been listening to the show on the phone, and you're doing great.
Hey, thanks, buddy. So your question is, does the dictionary definition of the word creation entail that there was a creation? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah.
I mean, are you referring to the
it.
creation of the universe?
I think so, yeah, like the world or the universe or however that works.
Well, I think there's differing opinions on it, but I don't think so. Like when I think of the word creation, I'm thinking that theoretically I could create a car. I'm creating it out of existing parts. But when we talk about like a theistic creation concept, we typically think of creating something from nothing, like ex nihilo. So if that's the case, if we're talking about that kind of creation, then no, I don't think that the definition of creation gets you anywhere, because as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any evidence that would point towards the idea that there was once nothing and then something, was given rise out of that nothing, and certainly not that a magic man in the sky did it. Now, Eric might have a different take on this. What do you think, Eric?
Well, what I'm kind of thinking is I just think it's odd to appeal to like a word having a definition to invoke that it therefore is real, because like leprechaun has a definition, but they don't exist. I mean, the idea of a leprechaun exists in folklore, pop culture, or whatever, but they're not real things. I mean, we could like conceptually invent a word that the definition of the word is something that does not exist, and
Are you telling me that leprechauns don't exist?
That is what I'm telling you.
This changes everything. I'm returning my Lucky Charms. I was under an impression.
Yeah, it's like the Tooth Fairy too. That turned out.
Tooth Fairy too?
Mm-hmm. Also the Tooth Fairy.
Tooth Fairy's not real either.
No. So Richard, I guess I'd want to I'm just curious as to what you really mean by does the definition of it prove that it's real, or is that evidence that it exists? I pulled up the definition for creation. There's two of them. First definition is the action or process of bringing something into existence. And the second definition is the bringing into existence of the universe, especially with regard as an act of God. So is because one of the entries, is that what you meant?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. There's different schools of thought with dictionaries. You wouldn't think that a dictionary would there would be all that much depth to them, but there actually is. And I this is Oxford, and I don't know what their particular philosophy is. Some dictionaries, they just give you the definition of the way words are commonly used, and other dictionaries take a philosophically different approach. It's actually this very weird, esoteric thing that I don't know too much about, and I don't know how Oxford is doing it, but if that's just what people often mean when they use the word creation, which I agree with that, I don't see that as evidence of anything outside of the way the word is commonly used.
That makes sense to me.
Well, hey, thanks, Richard. I appreciate the question. Great to hear from you.
Great to hear from you. You guys rock.
Hey, thank you. Cheers, buddy. Have a great one. We've got one more caller in the queue. I'm going to bring up George, and let's see what George has to say. George says, how do you maintain healthy relationship with Christian in-laws? And buddy, this is a doozy. So the first thing I would say, George, is I'm not a licensed professional therapist. I did have to take counseling and when I went to seminary, so I know a little bit about this, but I'm not a professional. That being said, can you give us a little bit of background information about your situation so we can perhaps give you, if we could give you advice, give you the most applicable advice? Uh-oh.
Nothing.
The in-laws get them? George? Well, George, if you're listening to this back, I'll assume your connection failed you. If you're listening to this back a couple days from now, here's the only advice I could tell you. If you have Christian in-laws and you want to maintain a relationship with them, it's not your job to force them to lose their beliefs. It's not your job to force them to become atheists. As a part of a family, sometimes you have to make sacrifices to keep the peace. For example, in my family, we have a pretty good diversity of belief systems in my family, politically and religiously. But we don't talk about that over dinner. That's not polite conversation for us because we love each other, right? We don't want to get into those fights. So that being said, I would just say, listen, if you love your in-laws and you want to get along with them, don't purposely try to create division. Don't purposely try to be like, yeah, but this, that, and the other, you should think like I think, right? I think that's dangerous whether you have a religious view or not a religious view. That being said, if your in-laws are pressing you, like they're trying to drag you to church, they're trying to convince you to be a believer, I would stand my ground and say, listen, I appreciate that this works for you. It doesn't work for me. I can't go and pretend like I believe something that I don't believe in. But I don't know, Eric, how would you handle such a situation?
I don't think I really disagree with anything that you said, but I would maybe just say, ask them or lay down the ground rules or whatever, or have meet with them and say, can we agree on this one ground rule? And maybe the ground rule would be, how about we never discuss religion ever? I know there's tons of people. I just had a family reunion. I just got back a few days ago from it. And almost everybody on that side of my family, they're pretty deeply religious. And I'm pretty sure they all know that I'm an atheist. And it just never got brought up one time, because, it shouldn't matter. And now, some people, if that's the only thing that matters to them, and Lord knows, we know that there's so many Christians or whatever can be like that. If they hold non-believers in contempt, well, that's something you just can't hope to rectify, unfortunately. But yeah, my unique advice, I would say, can we just establish it's no politics at dinner kind of thing. No religion ever, if you're around me.
Yeah, I think that's a good policy. Now, George is not on the line with us to respond, so I guess we can leave it at that. And I agree. If the goal is to have peace, by all means, have peace in the house. Now, with that being said, we're out of callers, but we're also basically out of time as well. So we want to thank our backup for the night, Scotty, my friend. Can you come up and say hello?
Welcome hey there, hey there. All right, great show. And I have to say, as a math teacher, there was one call there in particular that was very painful for me to listen, but I thought both of you handled that just perfectly. And when Eric mentioned the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. That was just the cherry on the top. And so I need to have a cigarette after this. But great job on that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Well,
sure I
thanks,
know who
Scotty.
that was. I've seen him. I've seen him debate people before, and he's out there. He's wild.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thanks for backing us up today. Did you have any other thoughts on the other calls, or did you just get like a little turned inside out when you heard someone destroying math?
Well, I mean, as far as the golden, I know we're out of time, so I'll just be real quick. As far as the golden ratio is concerned, it's based on the Fibonacci sequence, which is a very, very basic iterative growth procedure. And so so it shouldn't be surprising at all that we see it in play. And look where it shows up in nature. In a plant that's growing, in a shell that's building. It's all these iterative growth situations. And so it would be shocking if it didn't show up. And so it was just very, very, very frustrating to see all that misrepresented. And I would ask to our caller that we lost at the end, I'm not a licensed therapist either, but my wife and I are atheists, and both of our sets of parents are Christians. And the key is just set clear boundaries. And that's really the main thing, if you want to keep peace in the family, if you want to get along with people that you care about, set those boundaries, especially when there's children involved.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Scott. And with that, guys, we are out of time. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Eric, for joining me on screen. It was an absolute blast and a pleasure to have you here. Mm-hmm. And we'll see you guys all again next Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Same place, same time.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to stop questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your life.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.